And I'd like to introduce Sara, who will be doing strategies for retaining foster youth in higher education institutions. So welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Hi, everyone. I see some familiar names on the screen from previous conferences and just personal interactions, so thanks for coming. My primary role is I work at Washington State University, Vancouver, and I work on a program that supports youth who are in foster care and graduating high school or a GED program and looking to start college. And in that work, I have learned how difficult some of these, the difficult challenges that these students face in staying in college, retention in college, compared to some of their peers who were not in foster care. So I want to start off, I'll start off broadly with talking about some foster care data, some Oregon-specific foster care information. I'm not an expert in the Oregon child welfare system because I really work in Washington, but we do know some because there's overlap between some of my students have like, oh, I want to go to Portland State, one goes to Columbia Gorge Community College. So if you work at an institution in Oregon and have an area of expertise in this, please jump in and share your knowledge. If you have questions, I don't have a question slide at the end. So again, please ask questions in chat or unmute yourself as we go along. I'm going to start off with a 3-minute kind of get to know everyone activity. And this will be your first of 2 breakout rooms. It's a fun little Zoom bingo game that I played a while ago, and I thought it was too great not to share. So Shannon, do you want to put everyone in the breakout rooms? Then how do I make sure they can see this? Did I put it in the chat?
Yeah, if you have a link to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can put that in the chat now. And then how many rooms do you want, or how many people in each room?
You want to do like 4? I don't know how many people are here.
We've got about 13 of us.
Yeah, so 3 or 4 is fine. And we'll just be in it for 3 minutes. It's kind of fun, different type of icebreaker. See if anyone can get bingo and we can bond over our awkward Zoom experiences.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to send folks out.
Thank you.
How are you doing this morning?
Living the dream.
Are you relieved to have all your big...
I'm sorry that might have worked for some and not others. I hope it just provided a laugh or a good way to kind of share make light of some of our work from home adventures. So now we're going to kind of transition to more of what you probably came here to hear about. And so we're going to be talking about post-secondary is kind of what I call college because some of the students I work with end up actually going to trade school. So sometimes I kind of just have this catch-all word of post-secondary with foster care experiences. So as we begin today's discussion, I just want to remind you that many of the youth in foster care have reported that they want and expect to go to college. But what we have found out is that they face barriers to reach and retain that goal. And so we're not going to break out in small groups yet. I'm going to first ask you to think about first year college students as a whole. because then we're going to kind of tear it down. So think about challenges first-year college students face. Give you about 30 seconds. We can be real quick about it. Put your response in the chat or unmute yourself. And I'll just kind of call out the answers. I'm looking for about 5 responses. And if you want to just have it be college students in general, that's totally fine too. Taking care of yourself, learning to cook, clean, adjusting to living away from home or living by yourself, loneliness, pull of home, navigating new systems. Yes, college is a difficult system. Help, knowing where to go for help, making friends, financial support, roommate conflicts, study habits. Those are all great things. Adjusting to a new culture, change of pace, different finances, self-advocacy, learning to do that, housing difficulties, affordability, time management. Thank you. These are all great things that I think first-year college students and college students on a whole all really wrestle with learning how to navigate. So now we're going to go one step deeper. So these are first-year students in general. These are first-year students that might have mom and dad at home to kind of help. They might have social supports already built in place, mentors already have built in place. So then I know I haven't talked a lot about it, but just kind of based off your own experiences or your own thought, how might some of these challenges, time management, financial assistance, affect student with foster care experiences differently? Tam, you can unmute yourself and share too if you want. That's great.
My foster daughter was continually told, well, just have your parent call in. If you can't figure this out, have your parent call in. And as the non-named parent, that was challenging for me.
Yeah, so college is kind of set up to have the parent provide, but some of these youth don't have that parent in place. Someone said inconsistent support from home, not having a home base to return to during breaks. You know, a lot of times when they age out or leave their home, college, their dorm room becomes their home. And so, you know, financial aid, they might not even have a long distance relative or anyone to fall back on. So we think of, even if parents or caregivers don't provide financial assistance or financial assistance, sometimes youth not in foster care do have other social emotional supports that many youth in foster care lack, making these challenges a lot more difficult to overcome. One person said might not have help moving or traveling. Transportation is an issue. They are much more financially independent. So thank you. Yes. So we know everyone has challenges, and I don't want to discredit anyone's challenges, but youth in foster care or youth with foster care experience face these challenges at a greater rate. So now we're going to look at some national trends. So the dropout rate for foster care, this is the dropout at high school. So they don't finish a high school or a GED diploma. It's much higher than their peers. We see that only a third of youth with foster care experience attend college before the age of 25, and only up to 9% attain a bachelor's degree compared to their peers. So why does this matter? As we know that any post-secondary program will help someone attain a job, a higher paying job potentially than someone who never graduates high school or a GED. I work with a student who really wants to go to cosmetology school. I think in the state of Oregon, in order to go to cosmetology school, you have to at least have a GED. Because of how her life has panned out, sitting at school taking a GED causes her too much anxiety. So it's not just that we're dealing with school, there's so many underlying factors to consider. So now let's zoom in a little bit more on just Oregon. In general, Oregon has about 11,000 youth who have spent at least a day in foster care in 2019. Some of this data is pretty hard to get, so that's why we have 2019 numbers, but that isn't too bad. This chart right here is from 2017. I think emerging data suggests the numbers are about the same. Again, we see a very low high school graduation rate, a high high school dropout rate. And so what this means is the students who are coming to our schools in Oregon have overcome a lot. They may have had support to get through this. They're trying to use college as a way to transition, start fresh, start new, meaning if they're starting from scratch, they're going to need a lot more support than sometimes we give our other students. Luckily, oh, one more thing before I get into luckily. I wanted to look at racial disparities really quickly. And kind of the takeaway from this is we know that youth of color are less likely to attend college in the state of Oregon. But we see that's an overrepresentation. What this study found that children of color are about a third of Oregon's general population, which doesn't balance out to how they then represent in our colleges. So there is an underlying racial factor to consider too when we're dealing with youth in foster care. It's disproportionate. So that is the broad overview of this, of a little bit of the numbers of youth in foster care in the state of Oregon, and kind of talking to how dire the foster care system is in Oregon, and thinking about if this is it, when those students come to our colleges, what supports are already in place and what supports can we provide? What I'll tell you a little later on is that what I'll show you, I'll tell you now. Youth in Oregon can attend school, colleges pretty much for free with a tuition waiver. Not many students know that, but it's not easy to get that scholarship that belongs to you. You have to know how to apply for FAFSA. So there's a lot of steps in place that we're going to go over. But what I'm really curious and want to hear from you is we're going to go back into our breakout rooms. In your breakout rooms, I want you to think about, before I kind of tell you what I've put together, our barriers to retention. What are some things that might get in the way? These would be similar to our challenges. What are some things that you think could get in the way for a youth with foster care experience to stay at a school in Oregon? Or you can talk about where you work specifically. I'm going to give you 7 minutes because for every barrier, I want you to think of one way to overcome that barrier. So you'll be in your breakout room for about 7 minutes to talk about barriers and ways to overcome it. Then each group will spend about 45 minutes sharing the barrier. And then I'll present a few more slides. And then you'll share your strategy to overcome the barrier. I just only want you to break out in one more breakout room. So thumbs up if that's an okay approach. Okay, great, thank you. So Shannon will put you into your breakout rooms and I'll try to pop between breakout rooms to check in on everyone.
All right, looks like everyone's back.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We were just talking about snow while y'all were coming back. I'm ready for some more snow. So if y'all are comfortable, I would like to spend a few minutes, maybe everyone from their group could share for about 30 seconds about, let's just focus on barriers right now. Barriers to retention. I know, oh, Shannon showed her cat. Barriers to retention. What did y'all's group come up with? Share it in the chat or unmute yourself.
I can share for our group 3 of the things that we hit on. This is Mary from PSU. We hit on the large systems that students have to navigate and how that may be challenging for any student, but particularly somebody who might not have support outside of the university to help navigate those systems. We talked about financial responsibilities. If students are independent financially, they may have to work more, which can make scheduling around classes difficult, and also difficult for students to have time to really feel connected on campus and like they belong. And then 2 out of 3 of us in our group were, well, actually all of us in some way are working with disability accommodations. And so we talked about how students who come from the foster system may be at some disproportionate disadvantages in having access to accommodations they may need to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
We touched briefly on that in our group, in the mental health challenges, support challenges, that the adverse childhood events, the ACEs score, that just being in foster care starts increasing your ACEs score, which is frequently used as a stand-in for the ability of young people to process through trauma and process with trauma. So if you've had a trauma-laden background, the ability to make decisions, good decisions, is not always as strong.
Mm-hmm. And anyone from the last group want to join in? But I think this is a very good list, but I want to make sure everyone is heard.
Yeah, I can share just a couple other things from our group, in addition to some of those that are up there. But we talked a little bit about housing, and like if you're a residential campus, where do you go for holidays or school breaks and summers, and just like sense of belonging and loneliness and around things. Like if your campus has family and parent weekends, who do you bring to that? And just sort of the standard way of doing things, maybe not really speaking to your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I know those are all really great. And I think it came up in every group I was in. And I liked how y'all phrased it, was the large systems and how you have self-advocacy within those large systems. You kind of have to know how to advocate for yourself, or have seen it been done for you. So if you don't even know that you could advocate for yourself or where to go to request what you need, that's a barrier. If you need tutoring services, but you don't know that the universities provide tutoring services, you're not going to know how to go to that. Some students who I've worked with don't know that they have college advisors or academic advisors or financial aid advisors. They're just trying to do it all themselves, because their vision of college is you just do it all yourself. But if you've had a parent who's gone to college, you kind of know how to navigate these large systems better. So I think y'all all kind of hit on the barriers I've identified, and you added some really great new ones, such as like the self-advocacy one. So thank you for brainstorming with that. So this was what I was going to have you do, but we kind of all did it in one big breakout room. So let me see what my next slide is. Oh, okay. So this was going to be the slide y'all came back to after your second breakout room. You know, in your role on your university campus, I want to begin to think about what are small things you can do, and then what are just like in the perfect world scenario of things that would happen. So now we'll transition to what are some of the strategies to reduce barriers that your group came up with to some of your barriers. And then just you can unmute yourself and share as comfortable.
Kate Wolford in our group was talking about university attitudes towards student jobs, student employment on campus. Kate, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah. I have noticed, and this is an issue not just for students who may have been in the foster care system, but really like any student who maybe doesn't have financial support or a place to stay over a break, that I've noticed a view of student employment working in it, that it's almost like recreational, and that students aren't doing it to keep themselves alive, that they're doing it for like that extra money. And a few are, and that's fine. But that our jobs are really set up to like support a student during the school year, thinking that they will have other supports, and maybe they won't even be living here over a summer, for example. So we've seen that struggle with students who, you know, have these jobs and then they all end, and the student is still here and still needs that money. So I didn't talk about it during the group, but I think something that I could do is think more about how maybe not even necessarily have jobs continue throughout the year, but like really streamline a process for students who need a job over the break, and figuring out how they can get one and connect with the people who are hiring, and have those jobs really be maybe even like reserved for students with need.
I think that's a great solution or way to think about reducing the financial barrier. Anyone else want to share a strategy that y'all talked about?
I know that there's a program at OSU where you can sign up to be a home space for a foster care kid during breaks. And also we have a first generation support group, where mentorship group, I guess would be a better way to put it, where you can sign up to mentor a kid that's first generation in college and provide some of that college context. And while foster care kids and first generation kids aren't always an overlapping Venn diagram, they're usually pretty significantly overlapped.
Yeah. Oh, that's great that Oregon State does the, volunteer your home over break. I did not realize that. But maybe other schools do it too, so I'm not going to discredit what I don't know.
But it's hard for the kids to acknowledge the young people to acknowledge that they need it.
Yeah. So I have put together some of my own thoughts and experiences and just things I've tried to identify to help eliminate some of the barriers. I think we're all in this meeting kind of doing the first thing, which is we're just gaining awareness of the challenge and the issue at hand. These are two pretty good websites. You can just type in Google Foster Club or Oregon Foster Youth Connection. They have a lot of great information about the youth in care in Oregon. Foster Club is a national group, but it's based out of Seaside, Oregon. And then we've all know financial aid is a struggle for youth in care, especially, but I think for college in general, finances is largely a problem because college is expensive. So there are a few federal funding, FAFSA. I mean, I'm sure in your various roles, you always encourage a youth to fill out FAFSA every year, even if you don't think you need the aid, because in order to get other scholarships and other aid for the youth in foster care, they have to have their FAFSA filled out. If a student who hasn't graduated high school or a GED comes to you and like, hey, I really want to go to community college, you have to have a high school diploma or a GED to apply for FAFSA. I had to learn that. Then there's something called an educational training voucher, and that the educational training voucher is, again, a national program, a federal program. Every state kind of does it a little differently. But what it does is it looks at all the different scholarships and all the different monies that the youth is receiving, and they try to fill in any of those gaps. So say a student gets a $500 scholarship for textbooks, but their textbooks this semester are going to cost $700. I don't know how much textbooks cost this year, these days. Then the ETV would say, okay, there's a $200 gap in your textbooks. We can help fill that. So they try to fill out some of these gaps, and it's one that not a lot of people know about. And there is a state representative for that. Then you have state funding. So in Oregon, you have the foster youth tuition and fee waiver. And so what you do is a youth fills out the FAFSA. When you are in foster care and you fill out your FAFSA, there's actually a box to say you are a ward of the state. So you will not, you are automatically considered independent. You do not have to have any of your parent information. So it takes about 10 minutes to fill out FAFSA compared to if you're having to fill it out with all your parent information. They don't have to do all that. Then they submit their youth tuition fee waiver. There are some other state-specific scholarships. One I did feel like was important to note was the Pearl Scholarship. And if I'm remembering correctly, oh, it might be on my other notes. That is specific if you wanted to do any sort of health science related major. A lot of students are interested in nursing. It's a pretty lucrative field right now. So that would be a potential scholarship for them. And then colleges have college-specific scholarships for youth and care, but also open to any student on campus. You know, your college, but even departmental. So I always think start at FAFSA, and then some of these things fill in the gap. They're not perfect. That's why financial aid is a barrier, because they will try to cover as much of living as you can, but you still might have remainder. Like Katie said, over the summer, you don't get FAFSA over the summer. You know, so there are still gaps to it, but Oregon is really trying. It's one of 24 states that have tuition waivers for youth and care. So other ways, and some things y'all did kind of brainstorm, was connect across campus with very different organizations. So you said college was a large system. It is a very large system, and there's a lot of departments and there's a lot of different areas you can dig in. So if you know of if you have a food bank on campus, the diversity center, the cultural center, there's all these different centers. And I think some can communicate better than others. So just trying to connect across campus to different centers. Like, hey, heard this PowerPoint presentation about youth and care. Let's see if we can connect. If I meet a student in need, can you help with this? Or you just know, oh, this youth is close to me. They were in foster care. Maybe they might need help with food, especially during COVID. So I know now I can find like the food bank on campus. You can also look at community agencies. So like Tam shared about Corvallis has a few things they do as a community to try to support youth in care. There's something called independent living programs that will be in each of your community. And those are support specific for youth in care to teach them some independent skills. Earlier, y'all said something about a challenge for when you first enter college is learning to cook. Yes, that is a challenge. So independent living programs kind of help students with that, with budgeting. So they don't always have to reinvent the wheel. And then one thing we created on the Vancouver campus was a binder. And we just gave this out to each department, and it's supporting students from foster care. So it has just some general background information in it. It has tips, so kind of like what I'm sharing with you, community resources, different departments on campus that they could use. And we just delivered this to each department. We just made one for all departments, and they keep it in their, waiting rooms or whatever. It's just good visibility. Because if you're a youth, this goes to my next point, having visible symbols of support. So if you're a youth in foster care and you're going to your academic advisor and you're in the waiting room and you're just kind of looking at the magazines and you see this binder, you're like, oh, there is something on campus for people like me. I've never seen that before. So it kind of helps open the door for conversation. Another thing, and just doing a brief qualitative review of asking students who are kind of new to campus, first generation students, closed doors intimidate them. But it doesn't mean, like, you could still be having your office hours or whatever, you just are someone who cracks the door. So they said if a door is more open than closed, then they feel more confident going to knock. So just having a few hours a week or something with your door slightly more ajar could help them feel more comfortable coming up to you. And then knowing referral, this is mainly for like your counseling programs on campus. So then here are 3 programs that are happening across the state that I just want to briefly highlight. And then if I'm missing anything that one of your colleges you represent are doing, please feel free to jump in. But Portland Community College and Western Oregon University both have various fostering success programs. The Fostering Success Program at WOU provides community and campus connection support. They do luncheons, they help kids with scholarships, internships, and set up mentorships. The Portland Community College is quite similar, but online they spoke more broadly of they just really help kids think about and achieve their post-secondary goals. What both of these programs do is make sure that their students are applying to all the scholarships and try to streamline it for them. Since you can say the scholarships are out there, but sometimes it's really hard to know how to apply, to remember to apply. And then the final one was something that was a pilot program that happened out of Portland State University called Project Futures. And what they wanted to think about was how near peer mentoring would help support student retention. So they took youth with foster care experience who are juniors or seniors at their school and paired them with freshmen or sophomore on campus. And while it was a point in time study, they haven't done any follow-up that I could read about. The near peers who were paired with mentors compared who weren't did show higher retention at the point of time of the final survey. So that type of peer mentorship, it doesn't even have to be formal, just if you know 2 students of various experiences and you would suggest like, hey, I know someone maybe you could talk to, and you get permission to exchange information to both of them. That might be kind of an easier reach than trying to orchestrate something campus-wide, which is very challenging these days. So that's all I have for you right now. I did just want to share one more thing. I didn't put it on a slide. In thinking about COVID complications to all this, what I have found to be unexpected with some of the students I work with is the lack of internet or Wi-Fi at their homes. Vancouver is a lot more rural than I ever imagined it would be. And so Wi-Fi access has been very challenging for some of my students. So we've come up with ways of like thinking through transportation, going to libraries, because everything is opening at different rates. So I never want Wi-Fi to be the sole reason someone feels like they have to drop out of school. So I'm really just brainstorming ways to try to eliminate that barrier. So if anyone ever has any ideas, please let me know. But that kind of concludes what I have prepared. I am very thankful for your participation. Please ask any questions, and then I just leave you with a final task, a final reflection. As you wrap up your hour before you transition to your next task, to just write down maybe one thing you think you could try based off of our conversation. But I'll stick around, so ask questions. And thank you.
In the chat, we had a question if there's a digital version of the handbook that you could share.
I will see about that. And I will put it in the Dropbox if I'm able to find the digital copy.
And she's referencing there's a resource folder in Google Drive that I will be sharing out to all conference attendees afterwards.
In that folder that Shannon will be sharing, I did put some handouts of scholarship timelines specific for youth and care. So I did put some of the information that I went over today in there too. I'll look about the handbook though. That's a great idea.
I was also curious when we were talking about barriers and the tuition waivers, I was wondering, do you know how like being a part-time student might impact that? Because I know sometimes like that can impact the way aid is dispersed, and you know, sometimes it's not realistic for students who are juggling lots of life circumstances or jobs to be able to be a full-time student. So do you know if the waivers are designed to help with that or be okay with that, or is it rigid?
Yeah, so it's you don't have to be full-time. It is, I want to say prorated, but is that the right word to use? It's like if you're a 50% student, then you receive like the 50% or whatever. I haven't worked closely with having to navigate part-time funding for anything. I do think some scholarships do require full-time, but I know for the bigger federal ones, they do try to accommodate different schedules. I will say though, one is you have to be in good academic standing for any of these scholarships. Academic probation, okay, things start getting serious, but as soon as you are off probation, then that's really going to impact your scholarships, what you may have to pay back. So it's always good to stay like 2 steps ahead of the students' grades to make sure that does not happen.
I'm curious, Sarah, maybe this is more of like a brainstorm and I'm kind of thinking out loud, but I think that at my institution particularly, there's sort of like it feels like we're not very well connected into resources outside of our institution. And so like when a student is maybe having a financial issue that for some reason we can't help with, like we don't have summer school, we don't have any academics during the summer, so we can't provide financial aid during the summer, stuff like that. It sort of feels like we just kind of dead end at like, well, we don't have a resource for that on campus. And I don't know that we're very good at like partnering or being aware of off-campus things. Would you say that like it's more beneficial to students to like try to figure out something within the institution, or do you think it's okay or maybe even better to in those situations like really know our outside resources so that the student doesn't feel like we're their only resource and we can actually like point them in a direction?
Sometimes having it from one place is easier, right? But I don't think any one institution or any one agency can fully support the student. So I think what I would do in that situation is think about, you're at Reed, okay.
Yeah.
Would be to think about what sort of local, like how I was mentioning before, independent living programs there are. So if you're in Oregon, if you are in foster care in Oregon, then you qualify for any sort of independent living program. And those programs can be that bridge during the summer months. They do have emergency one-time funding. Sometimes they have continual funding. So I would say to look outside of the community, especially look outside into the community, especially knowing if during the summer your university is not at the full capacity. I just think that, involving the external community is very important. I know that it comes with some shaky grounds, but sometimes like churches have scholarships, religious organizations really like to help in this area if that's something the student is comfortable with. But we always try to go towards independent living first. I'm working with one student now who was in Washington, is now in Idaho. In Idaho, independent living services are limited in what they can do for an out-of-state student. So I would always try to make sure, like, are they in Oregon? Were they in foster care in Oregon? So I know that's kind of long-winded, but I always try to pull in as many people as I can.
No, that's really helpful. And I think that helps me think about it, because I think we're, as a small school that actually does have a lot of resources, I think we tend to think like, if like we solve it, and then if we can't, we just leave it. And sometimes we can't, like we can't give aid over the summer. So that's good to think about. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at time. But Sara, I think, are you willing to follow up with anyone if they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I'm sorry I didn't do any sort of my email or anything. That's awful of me.
You want to put it in the chat?
I'll put my email in the chat. I'm sorry about that.
Sara,
And I
thank you
put
for taking time to do this.
Oh yeah, thank you for coming.
Link in the chat as well. So for any feedback for OWHE and Sara, as we explore this topic.
Bye. Thank y'all.